First off, I want to join our colleagues in thanking Chairman Crapo for leading this committee so ably. I do want to point out, though, to paraphrase Mark Twain, reports of his demise may be greatly exaggerated. He's not going anywhere. He's still going to be a senator. He's simply going to be chairing the Finance Committee next year, but we've all appreciated his leadership. The economy is recovering more strongly than I think anyone predicted in March. And I think that's in part because of the response of this Congress and the CARES Act at first, and then the way the Trump administration, in particular, the Department of the Treasury and the Federal Reserve has directed it. So I want to commend both of you gentlemen on your stewardship over these last 9 months. Now, the economy could continue to recover even more strongly, in effect, and especially for those people who are still struggling the most, the waitresses and the busboys, the bartenders, the karate instructors, the music teachers, people who work in fields and industries that have lots of in-person, close, continual contact. So there's two things we could do to help solve that problem immediately. One is to tell these Democratic governors and mayors to stop with their irrational lockdowns. Tell the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, not to lock down small mom and pop restaurants while he goes off with all of his lobbyist buddies to eat at the French Laundry, one of the world's most expensive and exclusive restaurants, paying $300 for caviar and truffles. Second, for Congress to pass a new coronavirus relief bill. We all have bipartisan agreement to support those people who are still in need, yet Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi will not relent on their $3.5 trillion wish list. They want to hold up funding for small businesses and for restaurants and for industries like airlines, money to help schools reopen in some states or stay open, as the case is in Arkansas, so they can get things like welfare checks for illegal immigrants, or they can override state voting laws, or let violent felons out of prison, things that have nothing to do with the coronavirus. Those are the two most important things we could do to help those who are still struggling from this virus get back to work until vaccines are approved and widely distributed. What will not help, what was not designed to help, were the 13-3 programs that have been so much the point of discussion in this conversation today. The 13-3 facilities have achieved their purpose. The reason we wrote it and the reason members of this committee helped draft that language in March was to stabilize credit markets, to help ensure the flow of credit to fundamentally credit-worthy businesses and states and cities. It wasn't to subsidize unsound or failing businesses that were not going to be able to succeed before China unleashed this plague on the world. It wasn't to bail out fiscally irresponsible, mostly democratically led states and cities who had mismanaged their finances for years or even decades. It was to stabilize credit markets. And I have to say, it appears at the time there was some bipartisan concern that these funds could be misused. I will just quote from a few people what they said at the time about our Treasury Secretary. Joe Biden referred to these facilities as a $500 billion slush fund and a blank check. Ironically, Senator Brown, given the fact that he accused Secretary Mnuchin today of sabotaging the recovery or intending to drive the economy off in a ditch, said at the time, the money, $425 billion, the Secretary of the Treasury can decide is a slush fund or where to direct that money. Senator Warren said that we're at $450 billion slush fund that would go to the Secretary of the Treasury to help whoever he wants. And ironically, given what Senator Menendez just said to Secretary Mnuchin, this bill has a $425 billion slush fund with which basically the Secretary of the Treasury can say, I like you, you get this. I don't like you, you get nothing. I guess the shoe may be on the other foot now. And it seems like the Democrats, with the hope of having a new Secretary of the Treasury and a new administration, would like a $450 billion slush fund to reward politically favored organizations like, I don't know, abortion providers or marijuana dispensaries, or maybe to bail out their partisan allies in states and cities that have mismanaged their finances for years. But that's not what the law says. And that's the point that Secretary Mnuchin has been making all along, if I'm not mistaken. This is not an economic decision. This is a legal decision. This law was designed from the beginning to stabilize credit markets at the height of the uncertainty of this pandemic in the spring, and that's exactly what it did.
Yep.
Secretary Mnuchin does not have legal authority to keep these programs in place. He took the right action, and if our Democratic colleagues want this money to be available, then they need to work with us to pass new legislation. Thank you.